Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back. So the wife says I gotta stay on topic. I think the phone's gotta stop friggin' ringing because this is my 20th attempt already. Anyhow, so today we're gonna talk about the TRX4s. All of them, okay? I've owned this thing for a little bit now, and this is actually the tactical version. So there's my shell. I took the shell off ahead of time because it saves time. Anyway, some people complain about tail heavy. I say set the suspension up right to start with, and that'll cure a lot of problems, and you wouldn't have to strip your nice goodies off the back that you still need there. You know, realistically you do need tail weight, but you also need front weight as well, because yes, this stuff on the back, this tire only the tire is the problem, okay, for tail weight on the shell, okay, which adds tail weight to here. Stock setup on the suspension from Traxxas absolutely sucks. They do not know how to set up suspensions. At least they know how to build great vehicles, so hey, that's a good start at least. They should have actually gone with longer springs though on the shocks, because when you take all the preload off, you should still have a spring that sits there, not firm, but firm enough that, you know, it's not going to flop out of the bottom retainer cup, right? That's where it should be. They made the springs too short, which is what I believe is the reason why people crap about the shocks on this thing. You know, because you got to add so much preload to them. And right now, with the amount of preload I'm sitting at, they sit there just right. Okay. And now, if they could only do that with the preload all the way off, and if you do take the preload all the way off, well, they just flop around like crazy, and that cup will just fly out of there, and you'll lose it, and yeah, then you're euchred. Anyways, so there are a few things. I went to the Cove the other day with my wife. We did some crawling, and I pushed this truck a little bit past its limits from what I could do at Descheny Falls, only because we probably haven't come to the same kind of rock problems that you do get to find at the Cove, where you can really push the steering system in this, and I had a few stall outs. So then when I got home, I started looking up this servo. Now, it's a 2075X. The normal powerful stock servos have generally been the 2075s. The only difference between a 2075 and a 2075X is metal gears in the X version. They're both 9 kilogram servos. Okay? That kind of sucks. Now, they are fast and they do work in most situations really well. And I thought that it was a really great servo because I never had any stall out issues at the falls. But when I went to the Cove and got myself into a predicament that I should have been able to steer out of, I couldn't. It stalled out. And I was like, okay, now I understand people. Okay, so I ordered a 25 kilogram 6 volt servo, and that should be in a couple of weeks because I ordered it from China, my favorite place. And it's metal geared, waterproof, the whole enchilada, and it didn't cost me like a king's ransom, right? And so that's going to be the new servo, and it's blue. I like blue. So it'll be a little bit off color from everything else, but who cares? You don't see it. Well, it'll match these servos and stuff, which will be good, you know, so that'll be all right. So you do have to have some rear weight on the chassis. You have to have some front weight on the chassis, but you have to have it balanced weight. But you also got to balance your suspension out, and the idea on how to balance your suspension out for realism, if that's what you're going to go for, as a trail truck / crawler, it does both. It's a little bit of both, okay? It's not a specific crawler, nor can it really be, honestly. It's not a specific trail truck. It's kind of an in-between. It's kind of like a real vehicle on steroids to have fun with on rocks, okay? Dual speed transmission is definitely a benefit because of the 21 turn motor. The less turns you have in a motor, the more speed you have, the less torque you can produce, right? So with a 2-speed transmission that's geared really low, that really does help this motor perform really well in the low gear. But in the high gear, it kind of really isn't the best thing in the world for crawling with, because you can't lock the diffs in the high gear without wrecking your diffs. So that becomes a bit of an issue. So you've got to figure out a good compensating partner for that. So this is what I've done, is I've ordered an RC4W drive, 35 turn, 540 size motor. So it's going to actually remove, you know, 1/4 of an inch worth of weight, which I don't know how much that's going to add up to. Probably not much. It may or may not interfere with me being able to use my cooler, which adds weight. We'll have to find out once it's physically mounted up, because I ordered a metal mounting plate for this, because I'm metallizing this truck as I go, and the next thing is going to be the cover, which actually holds everything in place. It's a really weird system, but it works. This has no cooling fins on this motor, which I was kind of like, wow, that's surprising. But that's okay, I got a fan cooler, so who cares? This is going to produce speed still, so I'll have lots of wheel speed, even in the low gear. But I'm going to have a boatload more torque and better brake lockup too. Because the brakes are not the best with a 21 turn motor, okay? They kind of suck. If you're running in the trail mode, I guess, or sport mode. When you're in the crawler mode, the brake lockup is a little bit better. But not a whole lot. So the 35 is definitely going to improve things. Now, I've never used a 35 turn. My SCX-10 that I used to have had a 27 turn, which was quite good, and I upgraded it to, I believe it was a 55 turn, if I remember, and man, that truck, you can put it like this and it ain't moving. But the more weight you add to your machine, the less brakes you're going to have too, even with a motor this size, with a 35 turn. So you got to watch how much weight you really add, because the more weight you add, the more you're going to have to go higher turn rate motor too, because you're going to need that power or torque to move the darn truck without overheating and blowing the engine. Okay, so people who are still using a 21 turn motor, for example, and their truck now weighs like 18 pounds because they've metallized the crap out of it, are going to cook motors a lot, and their trucks are not going to be able to perform very well even in the low gear because they got so much weight and their brakes aren't even going to work. So this is where you got to watch how much weight you add and where you add it. I am all for adding weight onto the axles, only because this does not interfere with your suspension at all. Okay, what you do is you're adding downforce onto your tires to give you more traction. What you have to be careful of is your tires. These tires have what I call pisser holes, so they can breathe. And as you roll over wetness and water, they suck in a lot of water, which weighs you down even more. Plastic rims are fine, but you know, I mean, nothing beats a good set of metal bead locks in my opinion, which is why I have these that are going on later today, because I got my Widener kit in today. Yes, 9 millimeters. I get an extra 4 millimeters width, so I'm actually increasing my overall width by 8 millimeters front and back, which is going to be cool because that means I'll have a better stance. It's kind of like running really wide tires, except I'm not, right? So now, if I get onto an angle, something like this, I could easily flip my truck, right? And especially if I'm moving and trying to steer, I'm definitely going to roll it. With the extra 4 millimeters here, 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 and here overall, well, now I won't flip my truck in that type of situation so easily or at all, but then I can also get up on a steeper angle too. And because the bead locks I'm running don't have pisser holes, and these are a bit stiffer rubber too than the stock tires, a little bit taller too actually, not by, you know, a ton, but I'll have to show you another comparison. But these are going to, I think, work really good. These are a little bit narrower tire, not by much, but for what they lack in width compared to these, gets made up for with the Widener kit, because that's an extra 4 millimeters wider per size, so I'm actually gaining plus. So that's going to actually be a nice benefit. And again, these bead locks are heavier than my plastic rims, so that automatically adds weight to where it should go the most, okay, but without adding too much weight. And these aren't going to squat as easily as these tires because these got pissers in them. These don't, so these aren't going to squat as easy, but when they do squat, I'm going to get a lot more tread on the ground than what you get with these. Even though these are a little wider, the more you push down on weight, and this is where you got to watch how much weight you go on any tires, but the more you push down on weight, the more tendency you have to push this center in. Okay? And that goes the same for a real car if you study anything about auto mechanics at all, and tire pressures and weights and stuff like that. So when you have too little amount of pressure in your tire, your center folds in on you. This is a very bad thing to happen, especially if you're on like slippery surfaces like snow or mud. You're gonna really suck at that point. So you do have to watch the amount of bottom weight. Not against putting portal axles on that are all metal. Eventually that'll get done. But I probably am going to opt out for not using brass on the outsides. I'll probably go with aluminum to keep the weight off. I want to add some weight, but not too much weight, because I want my tires to grip. Okay, I don't want to burn out my engine, all right, by having too much weight. But at the same time, I don't want to destroy my truck, because too much weight is hard on everything else too, right? So that means that when you add more and more weight, you're going to have to probably consider a little bit different suspension too than the stock stuff. Now, setting up your suspension, that's the tricky part. We have tail weight on the body because of the tire, so we need some sort of preload, okay? We have weight here because of the sound kit. The sound kit weighs a fair amount, and it's sitting almost right on top of the shocks, basically. Okay, so we're already getting pushed down. But what you need is about 1/4 of an inch down pressure for chassis weight that's going to be evenly distributed weight. You got to figure out how to evenly distribute that weight. So if you've got a toy here, and you've got a little toy here that keeps your engine cool, and then you got your winch and stuff like that, and your battery, etc., you still got to keep this truck on an even level plane. It's kind of like take the truck in your hands like this, nothing on it, right? No weight on those shocks, they're fully extended. Okay, so everything is on an actual even plane at this point, and you got to keep it that way. Okay, so if you keep it that way, that means you got to adjust so that you have a little bit of downforce, about 1/4 of an inch down, and everything stays even. So when you push down, it goes back to the same spot. You push down, back to the same spot. Sideways pull, goes right back even. Sideways pull, goes right back even. That's how you got to kind of tweak things up for realism. Not necessarily the best setup for crawling completely, but for realism in crawling with a basically real scale vehicle. Okay, so you've got your Bronco, you've got your Blazer, you've got your Defender, you've got your tactical Hummer system. Okay, you've got your Sport as well, which has a truck body. Now, we talk about top heaviness. Lexan shells are not causing top heavy problems. What's causing top heavy problems would be, for one, my sound kit, because that's up high. That's causing a bit of top heaviness. Okay. The other thing that causes top heaviness is if you have a tall camera or a heavy camera. This thing is tall and heavy. So this can be a very bad thing unless you can compensate for that. Which means you have to have a little bit stiffer suspension if you're going to have a camera on here that's got weight to it. Okay? So you have to be able to hold your own on the course too, which also means your suspension may have to be a little bit stiffer, but your tire walls, your tires have to be stiffer. And these tires, although they are really nice tires, I will say, and they grip and they hold up on pretty much every surface so far. Haven't tried them on snow. That'll be this coming winter. But the problem is when you start to lean your truck. Suspension moves, yes, but look at what's happening to my tire already. And at this, if you look through the inside here, you can see that now your outside edge is not on the ground at all. You go further, now you're sitting only on 2 treads, and you're driving and you're putting so much pressure and squat on there, you're almost on your rim. Even though you still got some tread there, it's not enough. There's too much weight in the truck for the tires. Now, with my camera and everything on here, this truck only weighs like actually without the camera, sorry. Without the camera, I think it was, the truck is only at 7.6 pounds. These tires are not adequate for the amount of weight that they can withstand, even on an angle, okay? Because I mean, a real vehicle wouldn't do that easily, okay? So, we have, hopefully, somewhat of a solution. These are cool. We can actually probably use these to play ping pong with, or tennis or something. They bounce nice. These are my aluminum bead locks. Now, aluminum does weigh up compared to plastic. These are a lot heavier. And of course, my new tires are a bit stiffer compound. Okay, still got some gush to them, but they're not gonna bend and flex over this weight as easily. Okay, and I've got a bit more tallness in here too. So a little bit taller tire, so I got a little bit more of a fighting chance, but I got a lot more fighting chance now because I also have a 9mm extension kit. And this is going to give me an extra 4 millimeters of width all the way around. So basically 8 millimeters more this way, really, okay, because it's 4 and 4, right? So I get a total of 8, so I get a lot more available access for being able to go like this. And with a bit better tire wall too, and taller tire wall, I'll get a lot more ability this way too, before things happen. But you still got to watch out for top chassis weight, and it's not the bodies that are the problem, okay? The back tire, it's part of tail weight, you know. Right now my rear end is sitting down, well, darn near bottomed out, because I've got all the preload pretty much off the shocks. Okay, I'm doing a complete new setup on my truck, so I want to start over from scratch, and that's why everything sits the way it does. But even out of the box, every TRX appears to have tail weight problem in it, and the suspension is not set up by the factory right, and the springs are too short for the shocks that they're on. So that's like your problems right there. You can always solve spring issues. That's not a big thing. Or you can just get all new shocks if you want. Let's just leave that together. The light bar puts the weight across even on the body, and it sits down low, so it's not causing any problems there. But it also weighs nothing of consequence that's going to affect the performance of the truck. Okay, I've got aluminum front and back bumper mounts. The bumper mounts don't weigh that much more than the plastic stuff, and it's distributing the weight evenly. Okay, I do need to get a little more front weight going so that it takes weight off the rear, and but at the same time I need suspension travel. So what I need to do is set my preload up enough that I still have enough movement that when I lift up the truck, the shocks actually move. You don't want your truck sitting straight up like this, which is nice and perfectly even. You want that nice perfect evenness when the truck is sitting down on the shocks. Kind of like a real car, a certain amount of your shock actually compresses, okay, because your car being, the chassis going all of its weight down onto the wheels, right? Well, you need the same sort of thing with this, so you need about 1/4 of an inch, I think. About 1/4 of an inch would be great. But also the weight distribution has to be so that it stays even. If you want to add weight down below, okay, which has nothing to do with the suspension, bead locks, great investment. Changing your portal axles or just even adding weight to the current portal axles, great idea. Armor plating on the bottom. I ordered a 5-piece kit of stainless steel armor plating for the bottom. That's going to give me more bottom weight. And because of how many pieces are in the kit and where they go, it's evenly distributed weight straight from back to front. Okay, which anything that goes on my back is going to add more back weight. And that's where I have to recompensate my setups to allow me to still get this thing dialed in so that it stays on an even plane. I am not willing to remove weight because I think that is ridiculous. Okay, that you should have to remove weight to get it to perform properly, because you don't. You have to set your truck up properly, and that takes a bit of practice. We all go through it, different rigs, and no two rigs are ever set up alike. But I'm not going to take my back tire off and make things look like crap, or take all the other stuff off and make it look like crap, because it's going to take away from the scale realism of what it should be like even in the real world with this vehicle. They're in the real world, there's a back tire, there's gas cans, there's an antenna, there's probably the jack is probably there too. You know, trailer hitch does not weigh anything, it just causes problems with trying to get up on a steeper angle than this. So I take the trailer hitch off and I can go up like this, up to a rock, which I found out at the Cove as well. And finding out how much that servo really does suck kind of woke me up. So I got the 25 kilo on the way. I also ordered a metal steering horn as well. Okay, so I got 2 upgrades in one on the steering system that are going to be very beneficial that way. But that's where you're kind of at with that. So I would say don't listen to any videos where they say removing weight. Removing weight is not always a good plan. You gotta have some chassis weight to squat down on the sucker, but you also have to watch how much you put on, because you don't want to mess up your suspension too much where you run your suspension so stiff that it can't move around. At the same time, putting weight underneath the chassis area where it doesn't interfere with the suspension, you also need, but you got to watch too. I would probably say you need a touch more weight on the front below chassis level than on the rear. So if you're going to go with, say, portal axles, all in metal, throw your brass stuff on the front, do the same portal axle on the back, except instead of having the brass, put aluminum, because you already got a lot of rear end weight in this truck, you know, especially with that tire on there, and if you got a sound box in there, whatever, you've already got a lot of weight in the back, and you don't want a lot of weight in the back, but you also do want weight in the back so that when you're up like this, your front end is going to have front end weight regardless, okay, but you got to watch the weight too with the stock motor. And that's the big thing, is you got to ditch that stock 21 turn motor. It doesn't have a lot of braking force, even in the crawler mode, in the low gear, and it's definitely going to have far less braking force in the TRX Sport, because that transmission is kind of geared in between the high and low, they say, of this truck, because this is 2-speed tranny, and the low gear in this is excessively good, right? It really provides a lot of braking force, but when the truck starts to weigh up, you get less braking force, so the only way to increase it is with a higher turn rate motor. And I've never used a 35. I've used a 27 and a 55, so I know how they work. I've never used a 35, but in this truck I don't really think I'll need to worry about anything more than a 35. And I'm not changing my gearing around. I want to leave the gearing the way it is because the gearing is great and it works well with the transmission ratios. Gearing works great. So the only thing I'm going to worry about is my motor, and we'll see how this 35 turn works out. If this does not give me what I'm after, then I'm going to go probably from this to a 45, and I'll grab a 45 and a 55 at that point and see which one works the best, because I want the optimal engine for my truck, and that takes experimenting, okay? And without messing with stock gearing. I don't want to mess with the main gear system. I need to mess with this, because this is going to give me braking force, but it's also going to give me less overall speed on my high gear, but it's going to give me a boatload more torque, and torque really is what we need. We need a lot of torque, we need a lot of control with the trigger, and if you have a motor that's too hyper, like the 21 is way too hyper for this truck. They should have thrown in at least a 27, where Axial, when the Axial SCX10s first came out, they automatically came with 27 turn motors, which were pretty good. Now they come stock with a 35 turn, and a 35 is a lot better choice than the 27s, because we found that the 27s, although they were nice, it was a single speed transmission, but the 55 was where the best setting I found, and so did many others, for the SCX10s was, right? But now we have a whole new beast of a truck called the SCX10-2s, with 35 turn motors. I don't know what they've done to the gearing, if they've left the gear ratios the same for the pinion and spur. I'll find out when I get my SCX10-2, and then we'll see if we have to change the motor out or not. That's going to be up for debate, and we'll see what happens. But anyways, so be careful about how you add weight, especially to the chassis, because that affects your suspension. And learn to dial in your suspension with the stock shocks to begin with. And if you want to go to a different type of shock, by all means, knock yourself silly. I'm probably going to change my shocks down the line because I'm going to first see if I have any springs that will work with these that are better springs. If not, I guess I'll be ordering some new shocks. Maybe I'll take a look at some King shocks or some other kind of shock, but you know, I'm not going to cheap out either, because this is my baby that's going to, you know, last me for a long time, and I want a nice performing and heavy duty well built rig in the end to my specifications. You know, and I want something that can be a really good trailer, but at the same time a really awesome crawling platform at the same time. So anyways, that's what I got for now. Stay tuned for the next video. That's going to be installing the 9mm extenders and the bead locks, and we're going to see how that looks. And I'll have to do a video the next day or so when I get some time off and some nice weather, and we'll try out the new tires and setup on the trails, because that's going to be awesome having like an extra 8mm wider wheelbase. That's going to be like, that's a lot, really, because you think about that in the real world. That's a lot of width. Anyways, see ya.